Recording has started. Hello, Joe. Nice to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. I'm well, thank you. Sun is shining. All good. We were going to have a chat today about neurodiverse talent and how people can maybe better access it. And I thought, who better to have that conversation with than you?
Thank you.
For those that wouldn't know how we know each other, I'll explain. Joe and I think have known each other probably pushing 8-10 years. It's quite a long time.
Yes.
And that was when Joe was working in HR in one of the big, I think it was one of the big sort of magic circle law firms.
That's correct, yeah.
And we've always sort of shared similar outlook on life, values, sort of relationship-based approach to getting to know people. And Joe has since become a very well-qualified and experienced coach and has a very particular and sort of knowledge and awareness in the neurodiverse space. So we thought we would have a chat that we could share with others about how businesses, HR people can maybe look at their processes and how they can better access top talent. But I don't know if I gave you a good enough introduction, Joe. Do you think that covered it?
It was perfect, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean my experience having sort of had several decades working in large organizations from an HR perspective, understanding the processes and the structure and the support that HR is giving its businesses. I now, one of the areas that I particularly focus in is neurodiversity, as you said, and that's based on my personal experience and interest of with a child who is ASD, and that has obviously been a huge learning curve and got me interested in it. And I've been working with organisations for a number of years now, which is obviously very timely given this topic is increasing.
Yeah, and I guess where you have that innate understanding and knowledge that you've had to learn and develop and read up on and research, I guess, through your own lived experience with a family member, transposing that into sort of the workplace and how probably thinking about how your child is going to look at the workplace themselves, leaving school, and what that looks like to them now, and how we can make it a kinder experience, but also a mutually beneficial experience, so that the talent that maybe one individual who's neurodiverse possesses can really be harnessed and embraced by a business in a way that maybe some businesses don't even aren't thinking that way.
You couldn't be more right, Jane. I mean, as a parent, I was always, thinking, I was really quite concerned actually about what was the future of my child and how might he live independently and have a role in his community that he was valued and he valued. He goes to a specialist school, which is one of a kind and absolutely phenomenal. And I've been doing some work with them recently to help link them with organisations that are particularly proactively focusing on accessing neurodiverse talent. Yeah. His school is full of high. Are you getting feedback on this, Jane?
There was a buzz then, but I know we had that on another recording and it didn't come through on the actual recording.
Okay.
So
I'll suggest
keep going,
we then
continue. Yes,
that's fine.
And apologies to anyone who finds it annoying, but I don't think it will be.
So his school has very high functioning neurodiverse boys with all sorts of diagnoses, and they really are the sort of archetypal talent that organisations are trying to access. So we've had some really exciting conversations, and we've set up some brilliant work experience opportunities for these boys into some great brand names. So I can touch on that a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I'm feeling quite energized and excited
and
on behalf of my son.
And that the concerns you might have had, once you open up that dialogue with a business or sort of corporate businesses or organizations, and real explore the opportunities and the capabilities of neurodiverse talent, as well as non-neurodiverse talent, that the melting pot of everyone makes for a really rich opportunity for business.
You're right, but it's really interesting because, you know, when you sort of pose the question to me of how can people access neurodiverse talent better, where do they go, where do they get it, and find the right people for their organization, actually one of the things to really think about is that it's already within their organization. They are bound to have a proportion of their employees who have neurodiverse diagnoses or relate to a neurodiverse diagnosis and self-diagnose, or perhaps don't, but actually do have different sort of challenges, focuses, etc. And so I think one of the key things, first of all, is about, as an organization, how do you set the right culture and the right tone that genuinely allows people to feel safe to show their cards. And particularly where you have high functioning talent, neurodiverse talent, they will often have had to and be very adept at masking in the normal world, if you like. And consequently, they may not necessarily be really obvious to the organization. So it is quite a challenge to get them to bring themselves forward. But that is definitely something to think about, of how do you set up networks, mentoring, create good conversation, hold events, showcase that, that the organization is thinking about it and supportive and is keen to have the conversation with them. And a lot of organizations have had success, whether that be in the LGBT plus area, or whether that be in the BAME agenda, so actually capitalizing on some of their processes that they're already getting success from and just applying it into the neurodiverse space.
That's great. Are you at liberty to share some examples of some sort of organizations where there's sort of almost a case studied experience of it working really well, or examples of roles where you can sort of share how, from what you've understood and what you've who you've spoken to, that it's really working brilliantly for all involved?
Well, I think, most people would immediately point to the tech organizations. There's a huge understanding, and really in some ways you need to sort of step back and actually look at the different conditions and think about the opportunities of those skill sets. Now, look, clearly I'm generalizing. There are exceptions to every rule, but if you think about autism, often that will come with a skill set where people are very focused, detail orientated, rules driven, like the sort of systemization and process, good at analysis and pattern spotting, high memory retention, that sort of skill set, and that can be incredibly valuable in certain spaces, particularly sort of, if you're thinking about using numbers and spotting trends, a lot of the financial spaces. ADHD and dyslexia often come with more of a sort of creative angle, bit more around lateral thinking and innovation, big picture thinking, sometimes considerable hyperfocus, and that can really play into spaces where you need lots of people with different viewpoints to come together to get a better solution. And more and more organizations have innovation hubs within their organization, and thinking about whatever the challenges for their sector, for their strategy, and how might they really try and do things differently compared to their competitors. And that's a really valuable space to be playing some of those skill sets. And then you've got sort of dyspraxia, where actually they've got very honed communication skills, much more empathy, leadership, sort of strategy, problem solving space. So, you know, you can immediately start to see individuals, for example, that may well actually operate much better as a leader than in earlier stages in their career, versus perhaps other skill sets and conditions where they might operate better in a very sort of explicit space without this whole element that, you know, a lot of organizations think about progression and the fact that you've got to move up the organization. That might not necessarily suit everyone. So it is about trying to be a little bit more a bit more focused around how do you actually value behavior and skills, but then obviously the reward system that goes into place, because if you've got a sort of competency model that feeds into a review and a reward system, then, you know, that's going to create challenges around somebody who may not tick every box.
But thinking about that, the attributes, well, roles that need to be performed in a business, and the attributes that play into those, or that strengths that would play into those, and then, as you just eloquently described, from some of the sort of different diagnoses, sort of the ADHD, sort of the typical attributes of someone with ADHD or with that diagnosis would lend themselves better to a role that's highly has lots of sort of order and process and all the different sort of characteristics. So I guess talent acquisition teams and HR teams could start by maybe looking at the roles they have, and I guess they could employ a consultant to come and assist them with this, who's a specialist in this space. But it's
almost there are the hotspots in their organization, you know, whether that is a tech or an innovation, or whether that is around, you know, potentially a sales space, or more of a, you know, an analysis space, or you know, I think the challenge is that there is no typical, and you know, and that's the whole point of neurodiversity, and you know, it is that much more difficult, but it is about trying to put process in place that enables a more individual conversation, you know, for job descriptions to be more specific around what is actually needed for that job now, not for the potential of what they might grow into in X years' time. You know, and historically we've often recruited around, you know, good communication skills and sort of the potential to move into management and leadership. You know, and actually that's going to turn a lot of candidates away, as much as obviously mean that many won't be successful.
And that not everyone has to have that it's not about not having ambition to progress, but being very, very good at a level, at a role, and being exceptionally good at it is that should be celebrated and supported by a business, and that not everyone needs to be, and you don't need everyone to want to be the manager.
No, exactly. And I think what really, in the recruitment space, what's really interesting, obviously we're at the very sort of early stages of it, is the impact of AI on neurodiverse talent hiring, because you know, it sort of plugs in that you are looking for certain key elements, and it misses the opportunity for individualism and the sort of response that might be a bit different from the neurodiverse angle. So I do think that is something to be much more cognizant about. I think people are getting smarter around how they run their processes, and, you know, providing questions in advance, and you know, more flexibility about when a candidate goes in, rather than having to travel through rush hour, or, you know, all of those sorts of
accessibility and
adaptations that allow the individual to obviously operate at their best. But yeah, AI is definitely one to watch, I think.
Fabulous. I think in our sort of snapshot toe dip into the world of accessing or how can a business open its doors more widely or more supportively to neurodiverse talent, and also acknowledge that there will be many people within your organization currently who probably don't acknowledge or haven't had a diagnosis, but harnessing and enabling talent internally already, or those looking at joining you, are given the best opportunities to be considered and encouraged to work for you. I mean, I remember thinking Microsoft and McLaren, I always remember hearing that they'd had a very early adopters, that's not the right phrase, but you know, of process and role assessment that would enable neurodiverse candidates to apply very, very comfortably and easily, I guess, relative to applying to other types of businesses. They really nailed it early on.
Yeah, and I think there's some really good examples out there, and I think one of the challenges is where to find the good candidates, because you know they're not going to have followed the traditional education route often. You know, the system has been, you know, a difficult one for many to navigate. And they may not necessarily have reached their potential through our education system, and consequently, you know, the sort of top universities and the top grades, etc., haven't been attained, but it sort of therefore hasn't showcased the value that they can provide to an organization. So there are lots of charities that are getting involved in this space and supporting candidates to prepare for interviews and things like that. Obviously there's the schools directly, there's a number of really good quality specialist schools with, you know, incredible talent within them, but also just I think that element of being a bit more open-minded around where they, you know, where organizations source their candidates from.
I'm going to do a neat plug, or some might call it a segue here, but we are hosting a webinar with Joe and Andy
Barnett
on the 3rd of June, which we can, anyone that listens to this can sort of contact us, and I think we've put it out on a number of channels already, which will hone in on this subject in a more of a sort of a discussion webinar topic. So if people are interested and wanting to sort of hear more, they could come along to that on the 3rd of June lunchtime sort of session. Contact Trapeze if you're interested. But thank you very much. A very nice way to spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about a very important subject matter that thankfully is getting more and more exposure and understanding and awareness, and that's what hopefully we're just doing a tiny drop in the ocean part of by talking about it, because our world is talent and there's some fabulous people out there who are being overlooked. So it's very nice to have the conversation, Joe. Thank you for coming along to speak to us today. Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
Bye.